So, as we just went over, I'm going to re-explain it just because I didn't get it on the video. As we just went over, we looked at decreasing, and because decreasing is going down, these ones are going up, so we eliminated A and B. And then linear means adding or subtracting, but in this case, subtracting. So we looked at what each one is going by, and we can see that these ones are going by -8 and -9, and these ones are going by -4, -8, -13, -15. And so the one that would be most likely to be a linear function that's decreasing is C. Next one. Next one's talking about it says take this function, and what are we doing with it? Subtracting. So these are subtracting polynomials. And so although it may not look like the perfect little thing like this that we usually see, you want to make sure that this is another way that it could be written. And so all we do is first, let's put those invisible ones. So right here and right here. Then when I'm subtracting, what do I need to put in front of this parentheses?
A 1.
That 1, right? When it's adding, remember, we just drop the parentheses and combine like terms. But when it's negative, we need to distribute that negative. So remember, the first one, I can just bring everything down. But the second one, I need to distribute. So what's -1 times 1x? Cool. And -1 times -3?
3.
+3. And if you said -3 by accident, that answer is right there for you. So they're very strategic with how they pick their answers. So is there any other x squares here? Nope, so I can bring that down. Is there any other x's? Which other one? Good. So what's -1 plus -1? -2x. And then I have my last one, -6 plus 3. Beautiful. So which one's your answer? C. And so you notice that D is an answer choice. So D is in case you didn't forget to change that to a positive, they have that thing ready for you to mess up. So make sure you're being careful with that. We're going over this. Any questions on this? Yeah.
Where did you get the 1 when you subtract?
This one right here.
Yeah.
So if you're subtracting, like this right here, if you're subtracting two polynomials, you need to put an invisible 1 right here and distribute that negative. If it was a plus sign, we can just drop the parentheses because anything times a +1 would just be that same number. And so if this is something that you need to work on, that's from Unit 1. So Unit 1 is radicals, irrational, adding, subtracting polynomials. So if this is one that you would need to go to, that's the one that's going to be tomorrow during flex time. All right. It says the total daily expenses to operate Sheila's Pie Bakery are the cost of salaries and ingredients. Sheila has 4 employees, right? And so where do we see 4 in this equation? At the beginning, right? And she pays each worker a what? A daily rate. So what do you think that thing in parentheses is? Daily rate, right? Then, on average, it costs the same amount of money to make each pie. This expression shows the total daily expenses for Sheila's Bakery to make X pies. So what do you think X stands for?
The number of
Pies. And what do you think that stands for? Yeah, the cost to make each pie. So the question is, what does the term 475 mean? A. Because 4 represents employees, and it tells us to each worker a daily rate. So it's the 4 employees daily rate. Did you guys see? It's pretty simple. It's just kind of bringing back how the questions are worded to make you a little funky. So that's why we take these practice tests. And I know it's a lot, and we're almost done with it, but we take them. That's how you study for the SAT and the SAT too. You just take them over and over and over again. You get used to the wording of the question. All right, next one. First of all, when you're looking at your formula sheet, how are these answer choices written? Are they exponential, linear, or quadratic? Linear, right? Because there's no exponents or anything like that. What is the linear equation for slope-intercept form? Cool. So they want us to find the n, which is your what? Slope. And they also want us to find our b, which is our what? Y-intercept. So the first thing you always need to find is the slope. you can either write these as points, you can put them in your calculator, so like what you guys did right here with the stat edit, and put it in that linear regression and get the equation, you would get the same answer. Or we can use a slope formula. And so remember, they're not going to go, Kirsten, here you go, slope formula, we're going to give to you for this question right here, item 4. Remember, they're not going to say that, right? So you'll need to know, okay, because we need to find the slope, I'm going to have to use a slope formula. And so I'm going to just pick these two because there's no decimals in it. And so I'm going to just write them 6, 4 and 10, 6. And then the slope formula is given to you, but they're just going to have one paper. It's not going to say use the slope formula here. And so now I need a label. So how do I label? X1, X2, beautiful. And then plug it in, right? So what is 6 minus 4 and 10 minus 6? What's 6 minus 4? 2. And 10 minus 6? 4. What does that reduce to? Yep, we could divide by 2. And we get our slope is 1/2. Which one of these don't have 1/2 as a slope? A and C. And so notice, if this fraction was flipped, it would be 2/1, right? So they're trying to get you to forget that it's y2 minus y1 on top. They're a little strategic with it. Then I need to find my y-intercept. So we can either find your y-intercept by plugging in a point, or you can plug in a point to both of these and figure out which one gives you the right answer. Do you want me to do the plug it in method, or do you want me to show you it by hand? I'll do both. So I'm going to start with it by hand. So I have y equals, now we know our slope. What is our slope? 1/2. And remember, it could look like this. It's just an invisible 1. That also is 1/2. So I can put it like that just in case. 1/2 x plus b. Then you need to plug in a point. It doesn't matter which one I use. Do you guys want to use the first one or the second one? The first one, sure. So instead of y, what are you going to plug in right here? 4. And instead of x, 6. Oh. And then we just solve for b. What is 1 times 6? 2. What's 6 divided by 2? 3. And then how do you get b by itself? Subtract 3. You end up getting b equals what? 1. So which one's your answer? 0. So all I did is I rewrote the equation. I plugged in 1 point, doesn't matter which one, and I plugged this coordinate in right here. I plugged in the x for x right here, and I plugged in the y for y, and I just solved for b. Or another way you could do it is plugging it in. I could just take 6, 4 and plug it in for x. So instead of x, I'll plug in 6 right here. And so I could just solve it this way. What is 6 divided by 2? 3. What's 3 minus 1? 2. Does that equal this number right here? Does that equal 4? No. So I know that can't be it. You could do that with all of them. Let's try this one. What's 6 divided by 2? 3 plus 1? 4. Does 4 equal 4? Yep, so I know it's right. So when in doubt, I would plug it in. Plugging it in takes longer, but you can always use plug it in when you don't remember how to do it. Right, Warren? Let's put that away. Does anyone have any questions? Cool. Next one. System of equations. What could we always do once again? Plug it in. That takes pretty long. So this may be an open-ended. It has been in the past. And so system of equations, if we see the x and the y are on the same side, we use something called elimination. And so if you don't remember system of equations, that one is going to be on Monday, so unit 2B. So make sure you make note of if you want to go over that during flex. If you came late during flex time, starting tomorrow, you guys can sign up on Google Form and sign up for whichever ones you want to go over. So this will be tomorrow, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on Google. So on Google Form, you would fill that out with which ones you want to come to. And I will provide extra credit, but I need to see, like, you're with me, you're not just sitting there and, like, kind of being a drag through it. You're getting the most out of that session. Okay, so I would use elimination because both of these are on the same side. But the only way I can eliminate something is if they have the same number, different sign. So which ones would be best to play around with, the x's or the y's? To get to be the same number, different sign. First of all, what's in front of x? What invisible number? 1, right? So they're already the same number. I just need to somehow get one of them to be a different sign. What can I multiply? It doesn't matter which one you use. I'm just going to use the first one. Negative what? 1. Beautiful. And make sure you do it to all 3. And so what is this going to turn to? Negative 1 times 1x. Negative 1x. What's that going to turn to?
3y.
Plus 3y equals what?
Negative 1.
Beautiful. The second one I'm just going to rewrite. So 1x minus 2y equals 6. Now, what function do I have to do to eliminate something? Do I add, subtract, multiply, or divide these two? Add, right? We're always adding. And so there's a chance that this could be an open-ended where you would have to explain each step. So we add so that we can get rid of what's negative 1 plus 1? 0. So I eliminated it, right? Then we add down, what's 3 plus negative 2? 1y, or we could just put y. What's negative 1 plus 6? 5. So right away, we know our y coordinate, when they cross, is going to be 5. Which ones don't have that? B, C, and A. And notice that they want to try to trick you with that sign. Now, how do I get the x coordinate? I know this is probably my answer, so you can either solve for the x coordinate or plug that into both of them, and they have to work for both of them. So when I plug it back in, it doesn't matter which equation I use. So I'm going to do 1x minus 3, but instead of y, what should I plug in? 5, right? So what is 3 times 5? Now let's put. Cool. How do I get x by itself? Add 15. And what do I get? X equals 16. So does x equal 16 here? Yep. And so this is the point of intersection. And so when in doubt, you can always plug it in. Sometimes it's not going to be that easy. Maybe sometimes they'll say, what would the x coordinate of your point of intersection be? And so you couldn't just plug it in.
So first, when you were trying to get both of them different, you multiply -1 for what?
So I saw, when I was looking at the x's and the y's, I first thought, okay, what would be the easiest to manipulate so they're the same number in front, different sign? I looked and I said, okay, these are already both 1x. If I did the y's, I'd have to multiply 2 different equations. So this one I would only have to multiply 1. It doesn't, even if you use the bottom one, that you still get the same answer. I just use the top one. So to change this to a -1, I need to multiply by -1. And so you also need to distribute to all 3 terms, and that way we can eliminate. And you only can use elimination when both x and y are on the same side. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm.
So let's say it was a different number, like it was like 3 for the first like 3x minus, or like would you like multiply that by -?
So did everyone hear Gabby's question? Gabby said, okay, say that this right here was a 3. What would you have to multiply the bottom one to get it to be the same number, different sign? -3. You would multiply -3 to all 3 of them. And so if that's something that maybe you need some refreshing on, that's why on the, let me see, Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Monday, it's when we're going to be going over all just system of equations. So if that's a session that you want to go to, take that quizzes before, and literally you're going to take an hour to just knock them all out. Okay, next one. All right, so here's 3 companies, right? We have $6 per person plus a flat 100-time fee, $8 per person, a $40 one-time fee, and $10 per person. So normally, a lot of times, they'll say linear or exponential, but here they don't tell us which type of function is it. So we need to figure it out. Would this be linear, exponential, or quadratic? Linear. Why would it be linear? Because it says that verb, but it also is adding over and over again. What type of word would be an exponential? Doubling, or a percent sign. That usually, yeah, it's like growth or decay. or interest, anything like that would be exponential. So we know these are all going to be linear. So let's try the first one. So which one would be the slope? Because it's per, right? And we know that word per means slope. And what would be the one-time p? How would I do the second one? And then the third one? And what does X stand for? $10 per what? Person, right? So they're saying right here that Gavin can spend no more than $300 on catering, right? So it's got to be $300 or less. So there's a few different options that I can do. First, it says, what is the greatest number of people? So there's some of these that will work, but he wants to know what is the greatest number of people I can invite using one of the companies. And so if you're doing plug it in, and that's how you like doing this, you always start with the biggest number. So you would plug in 37 to all three of these and see if any of those answers are 300 or less. Then you would go to the next highest one, which is 33. If you don't want to do that, if X is per person, Y is your money, right? So I'm going to make all three of these equal to 300. Because we want to see how many people max can I invite using one of these caterers. So this is the different way you can do it. And this is just solving a two-step equation. Or in this case, a one-step equation. So I'll start with this one. How do I get X by itself? Right here, that's divide by 10, and what do I get? X equals 30. So that one, only 30 people or less can go. What do I do for the second one? Subtract 40, and I get 260 equals 8x. Then what do you do? Divide by 8. And what do you end up getting? Someone has to. What is it? 32.5. Now, can I invite half of Taylor? No. So how many people total can they have? 32. We would have to round down because I can't invite a half a person. So automatically, which one can I eliminate? Which answer choice? A, 30, right? Because 30, I know I can get 32 with the second company. Now let's find the last company. How do I get X by itself? Subtract 100 on both sides, and I get 200 equals 6x. Then what do you do? And what do you end up getting? 30 a little more work. Yeah, let me just get this going and then I'll go open the card. If you guys need your computer, go get it now. So if you missed the beginning. So when we're looking at these graphs right here, it says which data could be best modeled as a quadratic function. What does a quadratic function look like? What shape is it in? Like a U or N. And what does that call? It starts with P. And I go, parabola, right? So which one of these looks like a parabola? C, right? Even though it's not all the way up, it could be over here. So C would be most likely to be a quadratic. What would this be? Linear. And so would it be a negative linear or a positive linear? Negative because it's going down, right? So this would be a negative linear. What would this one be right here?
0.
No correlation or zero correlation. And what about the one next to it?
Positive.
Positive linear correlation. Cool. All right, next one. This is talking about Instagram, histogram. And so they're talking about text messages. And so the question is down here, it says, what should be the height of the bar from 6 to 10 text messages? So I need to look up here and see how many are from 6 to 10. How many numbers are from 6 to 10? Only these two, right? So how high should the bar be? 2. So what will be your answer?
2.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And so some of you guys struggled because you guys know histograms, but you weren't sure what the question was asking. So now make sure when it says 3 ordered pairs, because it's going to have it like this on your milestone, make sure you circle or highlight 3. You want to make sure you have 3. That could be added to the set, so that F remains a function. What cannot repeat in order for it to be a function, right? So X can't repeat. So sometimes they may word it as what would make this not a function anymore, but in this case we need to know X can't repeat because it wants to remain a function. So which ones do the X's repeat from this list?
B, C.
We have B because here's 4 and here's 4.
Yeah.
So we have F because there's -5, there's -5. What other one? And C, right? Because that's up 0 and that's 0. And then so which ones are our answers? A, D, and E. Can the Y's repeat?
Yes.
Yeah, and so see that they tested you because these Y's do repeat, but it doesn't matter if the Y's repeat. The X's can't repeat. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. So now, part A is below that. Here's the function, and they want us to find the factored form. So already we can see our answers are in parentheses. How do we factor?
I can do A times B, A times C.
Good, ACB. And so remember, a lot of the times we refer to it like the ACB chart, but they're never going to say ACB chart. You would need to know the ACB chart and factored, that's what it means. So what is A times C? What's 1 times 15? So we're multiplying to 15, and what are we adding to? Positive 8. So what two numbers multiply to 15 and add to 8? 5 and 3, ding, ding, ding. So how would I write those factors? And so remember, it says reveals the zeros. How do I find the zeros once they're in factors? What do we know the relationship is? Change it, or we make it equal to 0 and solve. And when we do that, what are our x-intercepts end up being? Cool. So you can always do the opposites of each of these and plug it in for x and solve, or you can find it on your calculator and find the x-intercepts, and you know they're the opposite of your factors. But just make sure that you know what to do. All right, what's your question? What's your question?
I said, wait, so why are we getting what answer choice not negative?
The answer choices are negative because they want it just in factor form. Like if it looks like
Zero.
this is your zeros or your x-intercepts, and it would be x equals. They would not be in parentheses. So the parentheses, remember, everything in parentheses is just the opposite of like your x-intercepts or your x-coordinate vertex. So I just wanted to show you what the x-intercepts were, but we don't even need to go that far. They're just looking for factored form. Did you not hear me the first time? Okay, next one is taking that same equation, right? And they want us to get it, they want us to get the minimum. So if we look, listen up, let's focus. If we look at our formula sheet, you guys can see on the formula sheet is vertex form. And it looks something like this on your paper. So, because I printed your guys' out a little bit later, remember Jabari had to go get them, I didn't print out the formula sheet, but I can show you what that looks like. But this is vertex form.
Is it going to say it next to it?
Yeah, it will say vertex form. So you can see the answers are in vertex form. So there's a few things you can do. You can either go on your calculator and look at the table and find the vertex. How would I find the vertex on a table?
You find where it bounces.
Where it bounces, right? So where it goes from one number to the next number to the same number. And so when you look in the calculator, that ends up being at -4, it would be -1 is your vertex. So then you remember, okay, in parentheses, it's always the opposite. So what's the opposite of -4?
4.
+4, but this is the same because it's not in parentheses. So you can look at it on your calculator, find the baby bump, and know that this is your answer. You can also do the formula for vertex, which what is your formula? Negative something over something. You could do negative b over 2a, and then plug it back into the equation to get your y. So that's in case, because remember, part of your test will not be calculated. So you can always use that. Yeah.
Where did you get the equation on top?
Because this is part B. So part A was factored form, and now it's asking for vertex form.
Oh, you just
Yeah, it's the same equation. Yeah. And so the last one is what they want you to use. So how you get from the red standard form to vertex form is we need to do completing the square. And so remember, what do I need to move first? The 15. And you end up getting x squared plus 8x plus what?
blank.
Blank equals -15 plus blank. And the point of this is you're like, oh yeah, Miss K, that weirdo says blank, really weird. That's when I remember I have to complete the square. And so when they say completing the square or they have it in vertex form, you can always do this. And so now, what do I have to do to get the blanks? Take half of that and then square it. So what is 8 divided by 2? And square it? And so see how there's no number in front of x squared, no coefficient? You can use completing the square in that one. I wouldn't do it when there's a number next to it. Remember, you have to factor it out and do all that work. I would do it one of these 2 ways if there's a number in front. But for this one, we don't even need to think about that. So how do I put this into a perfect, cute little square? X plus, because that's a plus, 4, right? Because it's usually what's in here, or what multiplies to 16 adds 8, 4, and 4. Then I add this. What's -15 plus 16? 1. Now to get your x-intercepts, you already found them, but they don't want the x-intercepts. They want it in vertex form. So all I need to do is bring that 1 back over there. So how do I do that?
Subtract it.
It just kind of goes right there. So it would be x plus 4 squared minus 1 equals y, which is a. And so if this is something that you kind of need to go over again, this will be in unit 4. So that will be Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And so if you need to go on Wednesday and go over how to do this, then make sure you sign up for that one. Does that make sense? So what would your vertex be if you're looking at that? What would your x coordinate, your vertex be? -4. Remember, everything in parentheses is always the opposite of your actual x coordinate. And then what would your y coordinate be? -1. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. All right, next one. So here's exponential, and a lot of people kind of forgot about this. So they're talking about end behavior. So end behavior is basically what it sounds like. The end of what the behavior is. Where is it landing, basically? So it's landing at 2, right? And so because it's landing at 2, that should be the end of your equation. Which one doesn't have 2 as the end of their equation?
A and C.
A and C. Beautiful. And then the last thing you do is the only difference is this B. What does that B stand for? Growth or decay, right? So if it's greater than 1, what's happening?
It's
Growing. So this one would be growth because it's bigger than 1. If it's smaller than 1, what would it be? Decay. What's happening in this one right here? So what would your answer be? You can also type these into your calculator and look at the graphs to figure out. Yeah. And you also, even if there is a graphing function on your test, but remember that half of your test is non-calculator, and I don't know what questions those are going to be. So I always want to prepare you to do it by hand, but remember, if it's going to be quicker on the calculator and you got that, make sure to do that. Just speaking real quick, if you have your own calculator, can you raise your hand?
I got my sister's.
That's fine, raise your hand. 6, 7. You have
Can I use my brother's?
Yeah. Okay, perfect. I need those calculators. I'm going to count again at the end. I need those calculators to me by Tuesday of next week. Because I need to make sure that I clear the memory so that you can use them.
Can we do that?
I'm going to have to do it. It's like illegal. All right, next one. Okay, so the next one is right here. And so what it's asking is for the y-intercept. What is y-intercept? What do we plug in for what? We plug in something for something. Every single time, doesn't matter if it's exponential, linear, quadratic. Zero for what? X. Remember, always has to be the opposite. So we plug in 0 for x, and they're looking for two functions that have a y-intercept of 0. You can also type all these into your graphing calculator in y equals, and look at all when their x is 0. That will give you the y-intercept. But it might be easier to just do it by hand. So let's plug in 0 for all these x's. And then let's start. So if I have 5 times 2 to the 0 power, what comes first, multiplying or exponents? What is anything to the 0 power? 1. Good. And that's why a lot of people start plugging in 1 for x. We don't plug in 1, it just ends up being 1. What is 5 times 1? Is that 1?
No.
No, it's negative. You would keep doing that. Anything to the 0 power is 1. 1 times 5 is 5 plus 0.5. Does that equal 1? No. Anything to the 0 power is, does that equal 1? Yeah. Anything to the 0 power is plus 1. 2, that's not 1, so this is probably it. Anything to the 0 power is 1. 1 times 0.5. 0.5 plus 0.5 is what? 1. So remember, it doesn't matter if it's linear, exponential, quadratic, it's always the exact same thing you do. You plug in 0 for x and stuff to get your y-intercept. How would you get your y-intercept? Plug in 0 for what? How do you get your x-intercept? Yeah, remember, it's always the opposite. Does this make sense?
Yes.
All right, so this one's it's a written, or not written communication. That's why I give you written communication, is because I want you to practice writing out these answers. Now, it doesn't need to be in beautiful writing. You don't need to go on forever and ever and ever. Do not go on forever and ever. Get to the point. And that's the most important part, because if you don't get to the point, you're going to waste so much time that you can be checking over your work, because I'm pretty sure these are the last questions. And so, right here, what they did is they solved it like a proportion. Because remember, when proportions, it's an equal sign, it's the same thing as inequality. So right here, when it's a proportion, remember, you can cross multiply. So it's like this. And see how the negative is in front of this right here? Put it next to the numerator so it doesn't mess with you. And so let's cross multiply. What's negative 3 times negative x? 3x. Negative 3x, right? Is less than, and now let's multiply forward in both of these. What's 4 times x? 4. And 4 times 2? 8. And so while you're doing this, this is part B. So part B, it says explain how to do it. You can do it, you can write it out on part B, or when we get to part B. So part B says explain how to do the question. Part A is saying they made a mistake, find the mistake. So we can see they started off correct. Then, how do I get this 4x to the other side?
Subtract it.
I subtract 4x on both sides. And that's what they did right here, right? So we know that's correct. And what is negative 3 minus 4? Negative 7x is greater than 8. They did that. Then, how do you get x by itself? Divide by negative, and when you divide by that negative coefficient, what happens to that sign? The sign flips, and so you should get this answer.
that's.
Did they get that answer?
No,
No.
she didn't.
And so remember, it's not going to be remember, you have a computer, so you're not going to be able to write out, you're going to be able to do it on your own paper, but when it says explain, whoever's doing that, can you please stop? When it says explain the mistake or justify, you need to make sure to explain it in writing. What?
Where did she write this?
Right here, she did flip this sign. Yeah. And so what are certain words that we want to mention in here?
Mistake. Inequality.
Mistake. Her mistake is, what are other words? This is what you should do first on your paper when you're doing this. What did she not do?
Negative, flip sign.
Flip the sign.
So she divided by a what?
Negative.
Negative what?
7.
Negative, what's that called? Starts with a C. Coefficient. So you may want to write these words. They're going to be looking for this vocabulary. Negative coefficient. And then the last thing, she didn't flip the what? What's the sign called? Inequality sign. They're going to be looking for those little things. So like inequality sign, divided, coefficient, negative, and like making sure you explain the mistake. And so that's how the open-ended is going to be. Get right to the point. But on your paper, when you get your paper, make sure you're looking at, okay, what are key vocabulary terms of what they did wrong in order to explain what's going on. Because a lot of people will go, well, they didn't divide by they divided by a negative. And they'll give you partial credit. They won't give you the full credit. It's -1. Because if 8 was negative, that sign wouldn't flip. If 8 was negative and 7 wasn't, it wouldn't flip. It's when it's a negative coefficient. And the inequality sign flips. Because if I say the sign didn't flip, they could be talking about the fraction sign, right? And so on Saturday is when we're going to be going over these different types of open-ended. So like practicing the open-ended and then going over how we would go about conquering them. Because they're worth a lot more than what your multiple choice are. But I don't want you spending too much time on it. Like, I'm the type of person in English that I want to make sure I get everything in, so I'll just go on and on and on and on and on about something and hope I catch the point. How many of you guys are like that? Like in AP English, my stuff used to be hung up on the board of what not to do. I was one of those students. So I had to try I was not good at English, so I would have to try really, really hard. And so I would just go on forever and ever and ever. But in this case, you are literally getting to the point, do not waste time. Because the biggest thing that people do to not get that distinguished, which all of you guys can get, is go on and on and on and hope you get to it. Know that you understand it, find what they're asking, and get to the point. So that's what we're going to be doing on Saturday. So part B says explain, show or explain. So you can either show that work. So if it says show, just show your work. Or if it says explain what you did. I multiplied each side by the denominator on the opposite side. Then I solved by subtracting that 4x on both sides of the inequality, etc. So they want to either show your work, so show this, or explain it in writing. But remember, you have a computer, so I'm not sure how you go about showing your work. So you may want to be prepared to write it out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Next one. This is one that I actually did completely wrong the first time I did it, so I want to make sure you guys are aware. Because I, of course, as I said, I'm probably one of the worst English students in the world. And I like to just I hate reading problems. I just like to look at it and say, okay, let me do it. And I did that, and I actually went over this with my class yesterday, and I totally missed something that I found today, and the answer was completely wrong. So I want to make sure you guys don't do the same thing. So it says the student council makes an initial investment in a savings account. So the savings account is this equation right here. Then they also, and I missed this last part, so this is why I got it wrong, I didn't read all the way. The checking account is this equation, right? And so M stands for months in both of them. So first they're talking about the savings account. So this is when you might want to color coordinate, because I did everything based on the savings account, and I didn't even read that there was a checking account. So I'm going to literally have to play this video in my last period class again to go over how to do it. So when we're looking at this, what type of function is this?
Linear. Oh, no.
Direct, exponential, right? So which one's your initial? Remember, you're given this equation for exponential. And you should know it's exponential because there's a letter in the exponent or variable. So which one number is your initial value? 2,000. So when it asks for the initial investment in the savings, $2,000. Do not write more than you need to. If it's just saying, what is this? Write the number. Don't go on and like type, I know this because, only if it says justify or display. Explain it. If they don't say justify or explain, write the answer. Do not waste your time. Then it says, what is the interest rate? And so that means we're looking at the B, right? And we were saying if it's above 1, what does that mean? It's growing. So all the 1 tells us is that it's growing. If it's under 1, that means it's decaying. And so to see what it's growing or decaying by, we need to see how far over or under 1 is the number. So now we look at this. How far over 1 is 1.005? 0.005. And so that's the R. But I need to move the decimal to get it into a percent. So how do I do that? Twice. And so what's your answer? 0.5%. Because when I move the decimal twice, 1, 2, my decimal's right there.
But Miss Carey,
Uh-huh.
tell me like when it's just because.
What?
When it's like it's just because.
When it's just 1, it's not exponential. It's just going to be basically a straight line.
This unit.
Unit 3. So this is Unit 3, so that's what you need to come to. That will be on Tuesday. All right. Uh-huh.
Data and statistics, that's histogram and candle.
And all these different groups. All right, next one is talking about the checking account. I thought it was talking about the savings account because I didn't read, right? And so if I were to take this milestone the first time, I would have gotten it wrong. It took me 3 times of going over this to figure out that I totally missed something because I didn't read, right? And I told you I'm the worst English student, so if you aren't the best at English or if you don't like reading, which I think a lot of you do, I'm with you there. So just make sure you're careful when they're telling you what to do. So the checking account is a totally different equation. What is the checking account equation? Good. So this is talking about that equation. 250 plus 100M. And M stands for what? Months. And the total is the total money, right? So they want to know how many months will it take for that checking account to equal $2,450. How would I get M by itself?
Subtract 250.
Subtract 250, right? And then Mesa, what do I end up getting right here when I subtract this? What's 0 minus 0? 0. 5 minus 5? 0. 4 minus 2? And what happens with this 2? Comes down, right? So I end up getting 100M equals 2,200. Then what do? Divide by 100. And what do you end up getting? So these cross out, I end up getting 22. So how many months? 22. Does it say explain anything?
No.
No. 22. Don't explain until this one. Now right here, notice it says explain your reasoning. That's when we need this explain. So now it says how much money will be in the savings account. Now they're talking about that first one again, the savings account. So what equation was that? Yeah, that exponential one, right? And we know after how many months will they be able to get the computers from this question? 22.
Oh, but
And
wouldn't it be different because they're from different places?
no, because they're just asking how much money will be in the Students' Council savings account when they purchase. They're 2 different accounts. So they're using the checking to pay for it. They just want to know in general, after that long, how much will be in the savings. And that's why I did it incorrectly. So I did the whole second part incorrectly because I used this equation for all of them. So make sure when you explain your reasoning, you can't just write it out. You'd have to explain that you would use this equation because that is your savings account equation. And so because in part C I saw that it was 22 months, to get the computers, you plugged 22 in for n. When you solved, what did you end up getting?
Oh, 2,231.9.
2,231.94. After solving it, I saw that there was $2,231.94 in the account. So you would have to explain this in writing. And I can always upload something on Google Classroom if you guys want to see how I responded to it. But you are going to have to explain in writing what you did and why you did it. So what are key words that we would use here? First of all, looking at the savings account, we would need to know the savings account function. The savings account function. What else would we need to know?
How many months?
The months. So we would have to know that M equals months. And in this case, we use 22. And then we solve. I think solve and solution would be key. And maybe even the savings account exponential. Just to be safe. So you get, like, you wouldn't just write those words on your paper when you're like doing that free write, just like write those words down so that you know what's important. So like there is a chance, like if Peyton just wrote part of it and she didn't answer all the questions, she would get partial credit. That's why it takes so long to grade these milestones, because they go through a homeschool committee. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And so if exponentials is something that you need help on, make sure you sign up for that Unit 3. All right, next one is multiplying radicals. So we can either simplify then multiply, or multiply then simplify. So first, I'm going to multiply the outsides. What's 5 times 3? 15. 15. Stay with me, I only have 2 more after this. What's 8 times 4? 32. Then you need to simplify. So what goes into 32? 8 and 4. 8 and 4. So the only reason you would simplify first is so you don't have to rewrite it like this. But this way is probably more of an organized way to do it, so you're not going on 2 different equations. Then what goes into 4? 2 and 2. 2 and 2. And those are primed, so I've circled them. What goes into 8?
4 and 2.
4 and 2. And what goes into 4?
2 and 2.
So who's already at prop?
15.
15, right? 15's that early bird. Who's going with 15?
2 and 2.
This 2, remember, only 1 per couple. Who else? And these 2. Can I have 3 2's go together? No, that would be an awkward picture, right? So who's in the crib chilling? 2. 4, 2. Brian. So what is, first of all, 2 is what's in the radical, so what could I cross out automatically? Now what's 15 times 2? 30 times 2? 60. So I end up getting 60 radicals. And so if this is something you want to work on, this is tomorrow's session during class. Any questions? Okay. This one is, there's a bunch of different ways we could do it, but first we need to look at key terms. And so this says arithmetic. What does arithmetic mean? Linear, so it's just adding or subtracting over and over. So maybe star linear, right? And what type of form are these in?
What's it called?
Slope intercept, right? Mx plus b. So we can solve for the slope, but we could also write these as points. So the first term, I'm going to put the term number always as my x. So term number, and then the answer. So in the first term number, what is, it says the first term is what? 5. In the second one, or it says the fourth term number, so what do I put right here? Fourth is what? -1. And then the last one is in the 10th term number, it's negative 22. So it looks something like this. So you can do a few different things. You could take these points and do that stat edit and put it into that linear regression, and it will give you the equation right away. But first, let's eliminate some. As I get higher, right, as I go from 1 to 4 to 10, what's happening to my y-coordinates? They're decreasing. So we know our slope has to be positive or negative. Negative. So which two can you eliminate automatically? B and D, right? Because that's positive. Now, there's a few things we could do. We could sit here and find the slope and then plug in a point and do the y-intercept, or I can literally plug it in and figure out which one works. So if remember, term number is your n. So if I plug in 1 for n, what's my answer? What's negative 1? Negative 1. Is that 5? No. Let's try this one. Negative 3 times 1 plus 8. What's negative 3 times 1? Plus 8? 5. Are they the same number? And you could do this with all of them.
How did you get the numbers again?
I just read it, so I said, okay, I'm going to make the term number is going to be my x coordinate. So the first term, the fourth term, and the 10th term. And then I need to figure out what are they. So n is always your term number.
Oh.
And this is in your Unit 2A quizzes. I go over this. And then the y-coordinate is right here. So 5 goes with 1, negative 4 goes with 4, negative 22 goes with So sometimes they'll be in explicit and recursive form, and those equations are given to you. So I have that on 2A. That's going to be on Friday. So if you want to go to that one and you forget about explicit recursive, that may be one you want to go to.
And they will have the explicit and recursive form.
Yeah, so if you see something like a to the n minus 1, or if you see n or you see arithmetic or geometric, you're probably going to be using those. But they have the equations there, but they don't tell you what is a to the n minus 1 means. That's why in the quizzes I test you on that. All right, last one. Please work. They have. So, because my board's not working, I'm going to try to do it on here. Try one more time. Nope. Okay, so here's the last question. It says, Jose wants to spend no more than $30 on apples and grapes. If I say no more than, could I spend $100 on them? No, could I spend $20 on them? So I can't spend $20 on them?
Oh, yes.
I could spend $20, right? So could I spend more than or less than? Less than or equal to, right? So which one of these, first of all, is not less than or equal to 30?
A and C.
A and D, right? See how these ones right here have greater than or equal to. So I would be able to cross those out. Then, how much does it cost for grapes? Or sorry, how much does it cost for apples?
$1.50.
$1.50 per apple. So which one has 1.5 with A? Or which one doesn't have 1.5 with A? That's left. C and D. So the only one left would be A. Sorry, B. You're correct. So it's $1.50 per apple plus $2 per grape. I have to spend less than or equal to $30. I don't even need to read the rest of it because I know B's the only one that would make sense. And so if that's one you need to work on, that is Unit 2B and Unit 2A. So